Hi everyone. Welcome to the channel if you enjoy our stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Your support means a lot and helps the channel continue to grow. Now, let's begin today's story. My name is Jessica Bellamy, and I was 27 years old when my family tried to erase me from my own life at an airport. We were standing at the international gate for a flight to Geneva when my brother grabbed my passport from my hand. He did not argue, hesitate, or even look angry. He simply tore it through the photo page, dropped the pieces at my feet, and said, "Now you can't interfere." Before I could move, my mother pulled my purse from my shoulder. My phone, wallet, keys, and identification were inside. That was when I understood the trip had never been about repairing our family. They had wanted me in Europe, far from my accounts, my attorney, and the trust my grandmother had left in my name. When I resisted at the last moment, they changed the plan and stranded me instead. I had no phone, no money, and a destroyed passport scattered across the carpet while airport security moved in my direction. Then a woman I had never seen stepped beside me and whispered, "Trust me, don't explain anything yet." Exactly 1 minute later, security officers surrounded my family at the boarding gate. One officer took my mother's purse. Another ordered my brother to place his hands where they could see them. My father turned toward me, and for the first time that day, he looked afraid. Before I tell you why that stranger already knew my name and what airport security found inside my mother's bag, tell me what time it is where you are, where you're watching from, and what the weather is like there. I'm curious to see how far this story travels. The woman kept one hand lightly against my elbow while the officers separated my family from the boarding line. "Do not let them pull you into an argument," she said. "Everything here is being recorded." Across the gate, my brother was protesting loudly, insisting the passport had already been damaged and that my mother had taken the purse only because I was emotionally unstable. My father added that I had caused a scene because I did not want the family business refinanced. Their story arrived too quickly, too smoothly, as though they had rehearsed it. The woman beside me leaned closer. "That explanation is for the cameras, not for you." An airport police officer collected the torn passport pieces, then asked me one question at a time. Was the passport mine? Had I given anyone permission to destroy it? Had I allowed my mother to take my purse? I answered no. My voice shook, but I did not ramble. The stranger had been right. Every detail mattered. When the officer opened my purse in front of me, my wallet and phone were there, but so was a thick envelope I had never seen. Inside were copies of my trust agreement, a temporary voting proxy, and a notarized declaration stating that I had voluntarily transferred control of my shares in Bellamy Lodging Group to my father for 2 years. The signature looked like mine from a distance. Up close, it was wrong. I knew because I had spent 3 years reviewing financial controls for the same company my family was trying to take from me. My brother stopped shouting when the officer held up the papers. My mother went pale. My father stared at the stranger beside me and said, "You." That single word changed everything. She finally introduced herself as Meredith Sloan, an attorney and the independent trust protector named in my grandmother's estate plan. Meredith told the officers that she had been monitoring an attempted emergency loan secured by my trust assets. The lender had sent her a courtesy notice because the trust required independent verification for any transfer above $1 million. My father had claimed I would sign the final documents in Geneva. Meredith had flown to Chicago to stop the meeting, but she had not expected my family to expose themselves so openly at the gate. "They did not plan this today," she told me. Today was only the deadline. My parents were moved to a private interview room. My brother was taken separately after an officer reviewed the security video, showing him seize and tear my passport. Every kind gesture now looked like preparation. Meredith handed me my phone, but asked me not to unlock it until the police had photographed the envelope and preserved the evidence. Your family may still have access to your email, cloud storage, and banking profiles, she said. We need to assume they know your passwords, your routines, and which memories make you lower your guard. That warning hurt more than the torn passport. A stranger was telling me the truth my family had hidden in plain sight. They had studied me not to protect me, but to learn how to control me. When the gate door finally closed and the plane departed without any of us, my father was still demanding that I withdraw my complaint. Through the glass wall of the interview area, he mouthed, "You're destroying this family." Meredith watched him, then looked at me. "No, Jessica, you are interrupting what they plan to do to you." She opened a slim leather folder and removed a sealed letter bearing my grandmother's handwriting. On the front were 6 words. "For Jessica, when they finally choose money." We left the gate only after airport police returned my purse and gave me a property receipt for the forged documents. My family was not formally charged that afternoon, but they were not allowed to continue their trip, and the evidence was referred for further investigation. Meredith took me to a quiet conference room inside the airport hotel. She ordered tea, placed my grandmother's letter between us, and told me I could open it when I was ready. I wanted to tear into it, yet my fingers would not move. My grandmother had built Bellamy Lodging Group from 2 roadside inns into a regional company with 12 properties, when she died 4 years earlier. She left me 38% of the voting shares in trust, my brother 20% outright, and the remaining shares divided between my parents. The letter explained everything. My grandmother wrote that she had discovered my father using company guarantees for personal loans and had forced him to reverse the transactions. She believed he would try again after her death. She also knew my brother resented me because I had been trained in finance and compliance, while he had been handed an executive title without earning it. "They will tell you that loyalty requires silence," she wrote. "They will call your cautions selfish and their desperation sacrifice. Do not confuse being useful to someone with being loved by them." I had to stop reading. A memory rose so sharply that I could hear the silverware from that night 2 years earlier. My father had asked me to approve a new hotel project outside Denver. When I questioned the projected revenue, my brother laughed and said I was jealous because he had found the deal. My mother accused me of embarrassing him. I approved a smaller preliminary budget just to end the argument. 6 months later, the project lost nearly $800,000. They blamed market conditions. I blamed myself for surrendering to pressure. Meredith waited until I finished the letter. Then she showed me the clause my grandmother had created. If any beneficiary attempted to coerce, impersonate, isolate, or unlawfully deprive me of access to my identity or trust documents, Meredith could temporarily suspend all transfers involving trust assets and convene an emergency review. It was not magic, and it did not automatically make me powerful. It gave us 72 hours to prove what had happened before the lender released funds. The Geneva meeting was scheduled for the next morning. My family had planned to use the forged proxy, my identification, and a video statement they expected to pressure me into recording abroad. Their original plan, Meredith believed, was to take me to a leased chalet after the meeting, confiscate my phone, and leave me there under the excuse that I needed time to calm down. The destroyed passport had been an improvised punishment after I refused to sign a packet at breakfast. My father had slid it across the table near our gate and called it travel insurance paperwork. I had noticed a page labeled voting authorization and pushed it back. My brother's face had changed. 10 minutes later, he tore my passport. Meredith asked whether I was willing to open my work laptop and review recent company transactions. My laptop was at my apartment, and my keys had been returned with my purse. But going home felt unsafe. My brother had a duplicate key. My parents knew the building code. More importantly, they knew I would look for evidence. Meredith arranged for a licensed security company to meet us, verify my lease and identification, change the cylinder, and document the condition of the apartment before we entered. On the drive, my phone filled with messages. My mother wrote that I had misunderstood. My father wrote that the company would collapse because of my tantrum. My brother sent only one sentence. "You have no idea what you just started." I took screenshots, exported the messages, and sent them to Meredith. Then another notification appeared from the company's accounting platform. An administrator had tried to deactivate my access 12 minutes after airport security stopped them. The snorts request came from my brother's credentials. I felt something inside me settle. Until then, a part of me had still hoped they had panicked, acted irrationally, and would come to their senses. But while they were being questioned, they were still trying to erase me. "I know where the backup records are," I said, "and I know what they forgot about our audit trail." Meredith looked over from the passenger seat. What did they forget? I locked my phone and stared at the city passing outside. That I designed it. Part 4. The record they could not erase. The security technician met us in my building lobby, checked my lease against my recovered identification, photographed the existing lock, and changed it while a second technician inspected the apartment for unauthorized cameras or entry. Then I noticed the framed photograph beside my desk had been turned slightly toward the wall. Behind it was a small storage card taped beneath the frame. My work laptop showed 3 failed login attempts from the airport's public network and a successful password reset request initiated by the corporate administrator account. Fortunately, the administrator could disable my access to the live system but not alter the immutable audit archive that our outside insurer required. I connected the storage card, opened the archive, and searched for transactions involving the trust, the Geneva lender, and a company I did not recognize. Northstar Renewal Holdings. Over 18 months, my father had authorized consulting payments to Northstar totaling $1.6 million. My mother, who chaired the compensation committee, had approved them. My brother had created purchase orders describing market research, architecture reviews, and international expansion services. Northstar had no employees, no office, and no history before the first payment. Its registered manager was an attorney who had represented my brother in a private real estate deal. The money had then moved into accounts connected to my father's failed development and my brother's personal investment property. Meredith called an emergency meeting with the trust's bank, the outside auditor, and the independent board members. I exported logs, preserved metadata, and wrote a timeline beginning with the first Northstar invoice. Every few minutes, another family message appeared. My brother sent a photograph of the front of my building with the message, "We need to talk face to face." Security reviewed the lobby cameras and found him outside 20 minutes earlier arguing with the doorman because his key no longer worked. The police were notified, and a patrol officer documented the message. I did not answer him. Instead, I searched deeper. The most damaging file was not a payment record. It was a draft strategy memo saved under my mother's account. The document described me as a resistant minority beneficiary and listed methods to secure my cooperation. Emotional pressure, temporary isolation during international travel, restriction of access to communication, and, if necessary, a petition claiming I was unable to manage complex financial decisions. Attached were notes about my therapy sessions after my grandmother's death. My mother had taken private grief and converted it into legal ammunition. Meredith closed the laptop. "You do not have to keep going tonight." I opened it again. "Yes, I do." They counted on me being too hurt to look. The next file proved the airport confrontation had been anticipated. My brother had reserved a one-way car from Geneva to a chalet near the French border under my name, while return tickets for the rest of the family departed from Zurich 3 days later. There was no return ticket for me. The booking instructions directed the driver to collect my phone for safekeeping during the stay. My father had also scheduled a remote psychiatric consultation using my email address, likely to create a record that I was distressed and confused. Their plan was not to harm me physically. It was to isolate me, manufacture concern, and make every objection look like evidence that I was unstable. At midnight, the independent directors joined a secure call. I presented the North Star payments, the forged proxy, the access logs, and the travel documents. My father tried to join using his corporate credentials, but Meredith blocked him because the review concerned alleged misconduct by management. 10 minutes later, he sent a company-wide email accusing me of staging a hostile takeover with an outside lawyer. The board voted to place my father and brother on administrative leave, suspend my mother's committee authority, freeze all non-essential transfers, and commission a forensic audit. It was temporary. Yet it was the first consequence they had ever faced that I did not soften for them. At 1:17 a.m., my brother called from an unknown number. I answered on speaker while Meredith recorded the time and advised him the call might be preserved. His voice was low. "You think those files make you powerful? Grandma left you shares. Not the family. When this company collapses, everyone will know it was because you chose revenge." I looked at the screen filled with payments to his shell company. "No. Adrian," I said, using his name for the first time that night. "The audit will show exactly who chose what." He went silent. Then he said something that revealed how little he understood me. "You won't let Mom and Dad lose everything." He was not appealing to my love. He was relying on the guilt they had trained into me. For years. That sentence would have worked. This time. I ended the call. Minutes later, the auditor emailed an urgent finding. Someone had attempted to transfer another $900,000 from a company reserve account while my family was detained at the airport. The transfer had failed because of the freeze. The receiving account belonged to North Star. The authorization code came from my mother's phone. By morning, our family betrayal had become a corporate crisis. The emergency board meeting was held in a downtown law office because no one trusted the company headquarters. Meredith represented the trust. I attended as a voting shareholder and the person whose identity had been used in the forged proxy. My father arrived with a litigation attorney and the confidence of a man accustomed to entering rooms he believed he owned. Adrian came last. Airport police had released him pending further investigation, but the red mark around his wrist from the temporary restraint was still visible. He looked at me as if I had put it there myself. Before the meeting began, my mother asked for 5 private minutes. Meredith advised against it, but I agreed on the condition that the conversation occur in the glass conference room with counsel present. My mother sat across from me and folded her hands. Then she leaned forward and whispered, "Your grandmother filled your head with suspicion. She made you believe being careful was the same as being strong." I stared at the woman who had packed my lunches, attended my graduations, and weaponized my grief. "No," I said. "She taught me that love should survive a question." My mother's expression hardened. "If you continue, your father could go to prison. Adrian could lose his career. We could lose the house. Is that what you want?" I told her I wanted an accurate record, lawful decisions, and no further access to my identity. What happened after that would belong to the people who made the choices. She called me cold. I reminded her that she had boarded a plane with my purse while I stood beside a destroyed passport. The meeting began at 9. The forensic auditors presented preliminary results showing $2, $4 million in questionable payments, falsified vendor reports, altered board minutes, and attempted use of my trust assets as collateral. The lender confirmed that my father had represented the proxy as authentic and told them I would appear in Geneva to ratify it. My father's attorney argued that internal family arrangements were being mischaracterized as fraud. Then Meredith produced the airport property receipt, the security footage preservation notice, and the original envelope recovered from my purse. She also invoked the protective clause in my grandmother's trust, suspending any vote by family shareholders on matters involving my trust until the independent review was complete. With their votes restricted and the independent directors aligned, the board had authority to act. My father finally lost his composure. He accused Meredith of manipulating an old woman and accused me of planning this takeover for years. I almost laughed at the absurdity. 24 hours earlier, I had believed we were going on vacation. The board asked me to present the audit trail. I showed how Northstar invoices were generated, approved, and paid, how descriptions were copied across months, how files were backdated, and how the administrator account tried to remove my access after the airport incident. Then I displayed the travel bookings and the capacity petition draft. The room changed before that moment. Some directors had seen reckless executives trying to save a company. Now they saw a family constructing a false story about one of its own members. One director, who had known me since I was a teenager, removed his glasses and asked my father whether the documents were genuine. My father refused to answer. Adrian did not. He said the memo was only a contingency plan and that no one intended to use it unless I became impossible. That sentence ended any chance they had of presenting the memo as harmless. The board voted to terminate Adrian for cause, remove my father as chief executive, suspend my mother from all governance roles, and refer the audit findings to law enforcement insurers and the bank's fraud department. My father's company phone and laptop were collected. Adrian was ordered to surrender access cards and leave the building. My mother asked whether the house would be protected because she had personally guaranteed one of the development loans. The bank representative told her that question would be addressed after the full tracing of funds. For the first time, she seemed to understand that family pressure could not control a contract. Snorts. Yet the meeting was not the victory people imagine when they hear a revenge story. Grief did not disappear just because the truth was useful, as security escorted them out. My father turned and said, "This company will die without me," I answered. "Then the audit will tell us whether you were leading it or feeding on it." The independent board appointed an interim chief executive and asked me to chair a special recovery committee. I accepted only after requiring that every decision be independently reviewed. I would not replace one family dictatorship with another. That afternoon, the auditors found the first major asset purchased with Northstar funds. A luxury condominium titled through a second company linked to Adrian. The purchase date was 3 weeks after he told employees there would be no annual bonuses because the business was struggling. The story was no longer confined to our family. Hundreds of workers had paid for his lifestyle without knowing it. My anger became cleaner after that. I was not fighting over an inheritance. I was protecting people they had treated as numbers. Just before sunset, Meredith received a call from the prosecutor reviewing the airport evidence. Investigators had obtained a warrant for the devices connected to the forged proxy and the attempted transfer. She listened, thanked them, and looked at me. They found a message thread between all three of them, she said. The title of the thread is Geneva Solution. The Geneva Solution messages removed the last space for denial. Over 4 months. My parents and Adrienne had discussed how to obtain my signature, how to keep me away from independent advice, and how to describe me if I resisted. My mother suggested using the anniversary of my grandmother's death to make me emotionally dependent on the family. My father proposed the international trip because he believed I would be less likely to contact an American attorney from abroad. Adrian wrote that if I refused at the airport, they should take my phone and identification long enough to complete the lender meeting without me. He also joked that I would freeze and cry before she ever fights. The forensic audit expanded. Investigators traced $3.1 million through Northstar and related entities. The bank accelerated loans tied to false certifications. Our insurer reserved rights under the executive misconduct policy. I could have used the crisis to force a sale, take the value of my trust and leave everyone else behind. Instead, the recovery committee sold the unfinished Denver development, closed 2 unprofitable management contracts, and negotiated a temporary standstill with the bank. I met with department heads who had been ignored by my father and learned that our strongest properties were still profitable. The company did not need another dramatic expansion. It needed honesty, disciplined spending, and leaders who were not billing their private ambitions to everyone else. 3 weeks after the airport incident, prosecutors filed charges connected to identity fraud, attempted financial fraud, theft of personal property, and destruction of my passport. I gave evidence, answered questions, and refused every request to soften my statement. Adrienne's attorney offered a private apology meeting in exchange for a letter describing the passport incident as a family misunderstanding. I declined. My father asked through counsel whether I would support a civil settlement that kept the company's name out of court. I said any resolution had to include full repayment, permanent removal from management, surrender of improperly acquired assets, and truthful cooperation with investigators. My mother sent a handwritten letter for 6 pages. She described everything she had sacrificed for the family. The apology appeared in the final paragraph and was followed immediately by a request that I protect the house. I returned the letter to my attorney without responding. The house had been purchased years earlier, but my parents had refinanced it twice to fund speculative projects and had personally guaranteed debts connected to North Star. Eventually, it was placed on the market as part of a broader settlement with the bank. Adrienne's condominium was frozen and later sold to recover company funds. His professional association opened an ethics investigation, and the board notified future employers that he had been terminated for cause. My father agreed to a lifetime bar from holding management or fiduciary authority in the company. My mother resigned from the foundations and community boards that had featured her as a model of responsible leadership. Those consequences mattered to them because reputation had always been their second currency. The first was my willingness to rescue them. They lost both. 6 months later, a negotiated criminal resolution was reached after the device evidence and financial records made trial risk impossible to ignore. Adrienne pleaded guilty to charges related to the forged documents and airport incident, received a custodial sentence followed by supervised release, and was ordered to pay restitution. My father pleaded guilty to financial offenses, received a sentence that included confinement and substantial restitution, and forfeited his remaining company shares under the civil settlement. My mother avoided confinement under a cooperation agreement, but received probation, community service, restitution obligations, and a permanent prohibition from serving in financial oversight roles. There were months of filings, interviews, audits, and mornings when I woke before dawn wondering whether I had gone too far. Consequences were not something I had invented for them. They were the cost attached to actions they believed I would hide. The company survived. We rebranded without the Bellamy family name, promoted experienced property managers, created an employee advisory council, and published audited financial controls. I did not become chief executive. I knew enough about power to avoid taking a role merely because I had won a fight. Instead, I remained chair of the recovery committee until the independent board hired a qualified leader from outside the family. My trust retained its shares, but I placed my voting decisions under a transparent review process. Meredith became more than an attorney, though never in the sentimental way stories sometimes forced strangers into replacement families. She challenged me when I confused punishment with protection. She refused to let me make decisions while angry. One evening, after a board meeting, she handed me the final page of my grandmother's letter, which had been sealed separately. Helena had written, "The day may come when they lose the privileges they mistook for rights. Do not return those privileges merely because their loss makes them polite." I understood then why my grandmother had chosen Meredith. She had not arranged for someone to save me. She had arranged for someone to remind me that I was allowed to save myself. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. My parents' house had sold, and I went there with a court-approved inventory team to collect a few family photographs and my grandmother's personal papers. My mother was waiting in the empty dining room. She looked smaller, but her first words were still about what had happened to her. "You got everything," she said. "The company, the trust, the respect. Was it worth losing your family?" I set my grandmother's recipe box into a crate. "I lost my family at the airport," I said. Everything after that was documentation. She flinched and asked whether I could ever forgive her. I told her forgiveness was not a key, a bank code, a board seat, or an invitation back into my life. Maybe one day I would release the anger completely. That did not mean I would restore access. I let the silence remain. When I walked outside, Meredith was waiting near the car. My mother did not follow. For the first time in my life, I left a family confrontation without carrying everyone else's emotions home. A year after the airport, I returned to O'Hare alone. I had a replacement passport, one suitcase, and a ticket to Geneva. The trip had nothing to do with lenders, forged proxies, or family reconciliation. Our company's new chief executive had been invited to speak at a responsible hospitality conference, and I was joining a panel about governance in family-owned businesses. Trauma had turned the airport into a symbol, but the place itself had never betrayed me. People had. That distinction mattered because it meant I did not have to surrender every location, tradition, or dream they had touched. Before boarding, I sat with Meredith for breakfast. She had her own flight later that morning and claimed the timing was a coincidence, though I knew better. She asked whether I regretted going to Geneva after everything associated with it. "No," I said. "They chose it as the place where I would lose control. I'm choosing it as a place where I speak for myself." I learned that I had spent years translating manipulation into responsibility. When my father ignored financial limits, I called it ambition. When my mother punished questions with silence, I called it disappointment. When Adrienne mocked my work and demanded my approval, I called it sibling rivalry. Naming behavior accurately did not make me cruel. It made me harder to use. The sale of the Denver project and recovered assets repaid a significant portion of the losses. We established a confidential reporting channel that bypassed executives, and every major related party transaction required independent review. I also used part of my personal inheritance to create the Helena Bellamy Financial Independence Program, which offered free workshops on basic contracts, identity protection, coercive financial control, and estate planning. My grandmother had seen the danger before I did, and her warning had given me time to respond. My family's legal cases ended, but our relationships did not restart. Adrienne wrote twice from custody. The first letter blamed our father. The second sounded more honest. He admitted that destroying my passport had felt powerful because he had spent years believing my shares made him less important. He said he expected me to panic and then protect him. I believed that part. I did not answer. My father sent updates through his attorney about restitution payments and health problems. I acknowledged only what required a legal response. My mother mailed birthday cards without return addresses. I kept them unopened in a box for several months, then asked my therapist why I was preserving a door I did not intend to open. Eventually, I discarded them. At the conference in Geneva, I told the audience that family businesses often fail, not because relatives disagree, but because affection is used to exempt certain people from accountability. I explained how controls protect relationships by preventing trust from becoming the only system. Afterward, a young woman approached me and said her parents had been pressuring her to sign loan documents she did not understand. She had assumed asking for independent advice would make her disloyal. She planned to speak with an attorney before signing anything. The most important thing I took back was not money. It was the right to define what loyalty required. On my final evening in Geneva, I walked beside the lake with my grandmother's letter folded in my coat pocket. I thought about the woman I had been at the airport. Frozen, humiliated, waiting for the people who hurt her to turn around and prove they still loved her. They never turned around. A stranger stepped forward instead, but she did not carry me away from the consequences. She pointed toward the evidence, the law, and the choices I still had. I had done the rest slowly. That was why my family's plan failed. They believed taking my passport, phone, and money would make me powerless. They did not understand that control built on secrecy collapses when the person being controlled stops protecting the secret. I never reclaimed the family I thought I had because that family existed mostly in my hope. What I built afterward was smaller, quieter, and real. Trusted friends, clear boundaries, meaningful work, and a life no one could access by demanding it. I felt grief, anger, relief, and finally distance. Their downfall did not heal me. My decision to stop rescuing them did. At the airport, my father had looked at me as security surrounded them, and fear had replaced certainty on his face. At the time, I thought he was afraid of arrest. Later, I realized he was afraid because the daughter he had trained to absorb every consequence had finally allowed one to reach him. That was the moment their power ended. Not when the board voted. Not when the audit exposed North Star. Not when the court approved restitution. It ended when I understood that protecting myself was not revenge, and refusing to hide their choices was not betrayal. My passport was replaced in weeks. Rebuilding my judgment took longer. But when I boarded my flight home from Geneva, I carried both with confidence. My family had once planned to leave me stranded and return with control of my future. Instead, they lost the company, the money they stole, the reputations they guarded, and the access they had mistaken for permanent. I kept my inheritance, but more importantly, I kept my name, my voice, and the freedom to decide who deserved a place in my life, in the end. Those things turned out to be worth far more than anyone's approval. Money can be lost and earned again. Houses can be bought and sold. Relationships can change with time. But once you surrender your ability to speak honestly, think freely, and protect your own peace, the cost becomes far greater than most people realize. And if there is one lesson I hope you remember from my story, it is this: the people who demand your silence in the name of family are often protecting something that cannot survive the truth. Healthy relationships do not fear honesty. Genuine love does not require secrecy, and respect does not ask you to sacrifice your dignity simply to keep others comfortable. The moment someone becomes threatened by the truth, you have to ask yourself what they are so desperate to hide. We appreciate every viewer who stayed with this story until the very final moment. Everything in this video is completely fictional and intended solely for dramatic storytelling, entertainment, and reflection. But the message behind it is one many people encounter in their own lives. Sometimes protecting your peace will disappoint people. Sometimes setting boundaries will change how others see you. Sometimes choosing yourself will cause others to accuse you of becoming someone different. Maybe they're right, because the person who finally learns their worth is different from the person who spent years giving it away. We hope this story reminds you that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect. And while it may change how others view you, it can also change how deeply you finally begin to respect yourself. In the end, that may be the most important relationship you ever build. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time. Remember this: you cannot control who misunderstands your boundaries, but you can control whether you abandon them. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is choose peace over permission and self-respect over approval.